Welcome back, my lovely citizens, and today we are going to be going over the top 5 Dondozo counters. Dondozo is a new Pokemon from Gen 9 that has a partner in Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri has the ability Commander, which is when it is on the field at the exact same time as Dondozo, Dondozo eats it and gets +2 to all of their stats, which is essentially ×2 to their stats. So with this, it turns Dondozo into what is practically a raid boss. So it eats Tatsugiri and becomes basically just itself on the field. The Tatsugiri isn't able to be hit anymore, and the Dondozo can't switch out. So it has +2 to all stats, and also has the pesky ability Unaware, which means you can't even really set up on Dondozo in order to try and outpace it offensively. So here are some workarounds in order to have 1-mon counters to Dondozo on your team. To start, we are going to start off with another Unaware mon, Skeledirge. Skeledirge has the ability Unaware, which also makes you ignore your opponent's offensive and defensive stat boosts. This means that you completely ignore the Commander boost from Tatsugiri on their Dondozo, meaning you can bypass their defensive boosts and their offensive boosts. This gives you more livability and also more ability to kill them due to Dondozo's lackluster special defense stat. We also have the item Throat Spray, so when we use Torch Song against other Pokemon, we will boost our attack not by 1, but by 2. And by attack, I mean special attack, not physical attack. The nature is modest, and our EVs are 252 special attack, 252 speed, and 4 defense. Obviously, you can change up the EVs to suit your team a little bit more, but this is just like a general spread. And the Terra type is either Grass or Electric. Grass is definitely the better Terra type for Skeledirge as a whole, because it very much complements the fire typing. It gives you a resistance to water and ground, which is really good. But electric is also relevant here if you wanted to hit the Dondozo, even if it goes Terra Flying. Dondozos in recent weeks in the meta have sort of developed into this weird anti-Dondozo thing, where it's an extremely bulky Dondozo with Fissure to hit other Dondozo, and some of them, in counter to this, have started running Terra Flying. Terra Flying allows them to dodge Fissure and be able to try to hit other Dondozos with their Fissure, so having Terra Electric allows you to hit both the Water typing and the Flying typing for weakness with Terra Blast. On top of that, some of them might be running Terra Steel, because Terra Steel is the best defensive typing. So if you run into a Terra Steel Dondozo as well, Torch Song is also a decent answer to that. The main thing about Skeledirge, like comparatively to other counters against Dondozo, is that this doesn't have an immunity to Fissure, and you don't really want to be running Terra Flying, or else you're not really a Dondozo counter. So it can lose to Fissure, but again, that's a 30% chance to lose to Fissure, rather than the 70% chance to two-shot with either a Grass or Electric Terra Blast. So I think this is a good counter. The moves that we have on this, which are really good general purpose moves for the meta as a whole, we have Torch Song, Shadow Ball, Terra Blast to use either Grass or Electric coverage, and also balance out our weaknesses a bit, considering Electric is still a good defensive typing as well, considering it is only weak to ground. So Electric's not bad as a Terra type as well, so keep that in mind. Protect and Slack Off are also very good moves on this. Protect allows you to scout someone else's move and block some damage, while maybe your partner can pressure it a little bit harder, and Slack Off can make use of your Unaware blocking their boosts to be able to live through a lot more hits as well. I would probably recommend Protect in this instance, but it's completely up to you whether or not you'd like to include Slack Off or swap off another move for something else as well. But this is the personal set that I would run. Moving on to number 4. Number 4 is Meowscarada. Meowscarada is very, very good in this format. Having Flower Trick, which is an auto crit move, plus the stab from grass, and being able to Terra Grass to boost that damage even further is huge. Terra Grass Flower Trick with Choice Band to boost the damage even further does one-shot Dondozo. The only real issue with Meowscarada and why it isn't higher than this is that Meowscarada doesn't do well against the Terra types that Dondozo can turn into. The hardest thing about Meowscarada being a counter is that if Dondozo Terras to Flying or Steel, it does make it a little bit more weird. Although you can just click Knockoff into different Terra types, considering at tournaments, all of their lists are, well, all of their team is open lists. You don't get to see their EVs or anything, but you'll see what item they have and what Terra type they have, which can help you with your decision. U-turn is just a hard-hitting pivot move as well. You'll always outspeed them, so you can always go into another check to potentially answer Dondozo. But if they have already used their Terra type or their Terra type just isn't consequential, it is very good to be able to just Choice Band Flower Trick with Terra Grass just to blow up Dondozo. It's an absolutely insane move to have. And on top of that, we have Knockoff, Play Rough, or Low Kick if you want to try and hit that Steel-type Dondozo, or other things in the meta that are weak to fighting, such as Tyranitar. That's a good example of one. And then we also have U-turn for a pivot, and our EVs are the obvious 252 attack, 252 speed, and the extra 4 in defense for good measure. Moving on to number 3, we have Rotom-Wash. This particular Rotom set is meant to tank a hit from Dondozo. It always outspeeds even with them at +2, and being able to 1 to 2 shot depending on their spread is also really good. This set is Levitate, Choice Specs. The nature is either Modest or Timid, depending on what you want to spec and what you want to outspeed, and Terra Fire or Electric, depending on whether or not you want to run Terra Blast to cover the Steel types that are running rampant in the format at the moment. Our moves are Thunderbolt, Hydro Pump, Volt Switch, and Terra Blast or Trick if you decide to run Terra Electric. Trick is good for crippling physical mons as well by locking them into a specific move. This can also be used to cripple Dondozo as well if it's a Rest Sleep Talk set. So if they're down to like 50% health and they rest, you can trick Choice Specs onto them, which doesn't help them because they don't use special attacking moves, and get them locked into rest, which is really good. On top of that, you have 252 special attack, 252 speed, and 4 defense. And for good measure, we also have 3.5, or 3 number 2, Rotom-Wash's defensive set for this. So this set is Rotom-Wash with Levitate, either Leftovers or Citrus Berry, depending on the rest of your team, Bold Nature, and Terra Electric to remove any other weakness. Although in this case, I don't think you want to Terra Electric, because you want to keep that water typing to resist Wave Crash. But yeah, the moves are Volt Switch, Hydro Pump, Will-O-Wisp if you scout out in advance that they aren't Water Veil or the Rest set, because a lot of them are still offensive and not necessarily going to be the defensive Rest set, but there are a lot of defensive Rest sets as well, and Protect and Pain Split. Pain Split is a good move on this, honestly, because of how high Dondozo's HP stat is. So after they rest, you can basically get back all of your HP and take down a lot of their health as well, to be able to chip them down to where a Volt Switch might kill. On top of that, you have 252 HP, 252 defense, and 4 special defense. So Rotom-Wash has a lot of different ways that you can use it in order to counter Dondozo effectively. Moving on to number 2, Amoonguss. This is a very, very good defensive Pokemon in the format. It has Regenerator, so anytime it switches out, it gets back a third of its health. Citrus Berry lets it live a lot longer. You could also run potentially Leftovers on this set as well. The Bold Nature is to further bolster our defenses to make sure that we live long enough to actually make use of our counter to Dondozo being Clear Smog. Clear Smog removes all stat changes to the Pokemon that this hits. So if you Clear Smog something, it will be reset to 0 stat boosts. So with the Omni Boost that it gets 2 to every single stat, you can Clear Smog it and remove that. You can also use Rage Powder to redirect their damage to you if you have another offensive check on your field. So you can redirect the Dondozo damage to the Amoonguss, which otherwise doesn't die to it, while pressuring it with your second Pokemon slot. We also have Terra Water / Flying here. Terra Water is just because it's generally the best defensive typing for Amoonguss, because you can swap your Fire weakness into a Fire resistance, and the only things that Water is weak to are Electric and Grass, which Amoonguss already resists in the first place. So Water is a nice defensive typing to swap to in a pinch if you're up against, like, certain Fire Pokemon in the meta. But we also have Terra Flying as an option here, because it dodges Fissure. Because really the only thing that Dondozo can do to Amoonguss is Fissure it. And if you Terra Flying, you dodge the Fissure entirely, Clear Smog them, and then they're back down to 0 stat changes. Another thing that Dondozo can do is Dondozo can Terra to Steel to be immune to Clear Smog, but in that case you can Rage Powder to redirect damage to the Amoonguss while swinging at it offensively with another check you have on your team. You also have Spore to put things to sleep, but against the Rest Talk set of Dondozo, that's not going to be super useful, but Spore is useful against a lot of other things in the meta, so I wouldn't cut that for anything. And then you also have Pollen Puff to be able to have both a damaging attacking move, or heal one of your allied Pokemon, because Pollen Puff is either a base 90 special attacking bug move that hits your opponent, or it heals your ally by half, depending on what Pokemon you target. You could also run Protect over this as well, especially if you have leftovers, to get a little bit of extra recovery out of this set as well. The EVs are 252 HP, 252 defense, and 4 special defense, but again, you can spec this to whatever you want. Moving on to a few honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1 would be Grafaiai. You might not think that Grafaiai is a really good counter to Dondozo, but it's really interesting to be able to use Doodle to copy Unaware onto both of your Pokemon, meaning that Dondozo is much less of an offensive threat now. If you copy Unaware onto a Pokemon that both does well defensively against it and can pressure it super well, you can put yourself into a good position just by changing your ability to Unaware, which most Dondozo are running right now. So I'd say Grafaiai is definitely a sleeper counter, but I don't think it's as good as some of these other ones because it by itself is not a counter. It has to be played alongside something that can counter it by using Doodle in tandem with it. On top of that, this is definitely a lot more team space, which is why it's definitely not in the top 5 counters, but 3 Fake Out Mons looping around can make sure that the Dondozo does absolutely nothing. You Fake Out with one, swap in with another, Fake Out with that, swap the first one for another Fake Out, and then you keep looping and the Dondozo can't do anything. The only issue with this is that there is an item in the game called Covert Cloak, which many Dondozo are running, which blocks the secondary effects of attacks. So, unfortunately, if you run into a Covert Cloak Dondozo, these Fake Outs will not actually be flinching them. Now, let's move on to the final one, which I'm sure a lot of you can guess, as it is a very prevalent mon in the format. Murkrow. Murkrow is the best utility counter to Dondozo. Murkrow is a Pokemon with the ability Prankster that allows them to use any status moves with priority. It gives +1 priority to any status moves. So, with this, you can Priority Haze remove all of Dondozo's stats, which is insane. You can immediately shut down Dondozo's main gimmick by just using Haze, and then the rest of your team can deal with it. On top of that, you could also run something like Foul Play so you actually have something to swing with, but that's not really necessary. In my opinion, I think the best set for Murkrow would be Murkrow with Prankster, Focus Sash, Timid or Jolly, it doesn't really matter. Honestly, you can run pretty much anything as long as you have enough speed to outspeed some of the other mons with priority in the meta. And then I definitely would not recommend using a Terra type with this. Like, I'm not 100% sure what even a good Terra type would be for this. Like, maybe you run Dark just to boost your foul play, but I don't think it's ever going to come up that you actually use your Terra for this. It's just so good as a utility mon in the first place. And obviously the moves are Tailwind to boost your team's speed. That's just generally good in, like, every situation. Then you have Haze, which is able to reset all of your opponent's stats. You reset the Dondozo back to 0, and it's no longer an oppressive threat. Then there's a lot of other utility options you can run as well. You could run Quash, which is an attack that makes your opponent, the targeted opponent Pokemon, move last in a turn, so basically gives them negative priority. Which is insane. Making a Pokemon go last can make it where insanely fast Pokemon are able to be outsped by slower Pokemon that can just check it, just to remove certain threats to your team. Quash is really good. On top of that, Thunder Wave is also good for just paralyzing something, nerfing their speed down to half, and also making it where they're basically on a coin flip on whether or not they even get to act for a turn. And obviously, I think you want to be playing Protect, because that protects you from things like Fake Out being able to make you unable to move for a turn and breaking your Focus Sash, so I think Protect is kind of necessary on this. The EVs for this are 252 HP, 252 speed, and 4 defense. Honestly, the main relevant one here is speed because you are Focus Sashed, but the HP could come in handy in a pinch if things aren't able to pressure it hard enough to even 2-hit KO it. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. I hope a little bit of this is able to help you with your team compositions in facing Dondozo teams, and honestly, if you're having any trouble with facing any specific Pokemon or any specific team combinations in the meta, maybe Annihilate or something, feel free to leave that in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch y'all later. Stay on guard.